Today, I want to be serious. Hi, I'm Carolyn, and I'm autistic and ADHD.
Hi, Caroline.
I don't think that a lot of people would recognize immediately that I'm autistic, and I think that there's a lot of disbelief around that, honestly, because I'm very high masking. If you don't know what that means, it means that I do a lot of things to cover up the fact that I'm autistic, and at this point I do them unconsciously. I don't really notice I'm doing them. For instance, I make eye contact even whenever it's uncomfortable for me. So a lot of autistic people don't like making eye contact because it feels uncomfortable. It feels almost as intimate as kissing someone on the mouth when you just met them, you don't even know them. And I do things a lot like I'm doing right now, like changing the inflection of my voice. When I'm just info dumping about something, I tend to talk in a really monotone voice, but I realize that people's eyes glaze over when I do that. So a lot of times I put conscious effort into changing the tone of my voice, the volume, all of that stuff. And for me, it doesn't come natural to have reciprocal conversations with people. Like, if you ask me how I'm doing, I'm probably going to answer that, but then it's not going to come naturally to me to ask you how you're doing back. I have to consciously think about that. And the only reason I know that is because I've observed over the years with my pattern recognition brain that people don't like when you don't ask them back. But in my language, in the autistic language, I think it's more normal, like, for people, they don't wait. I don't wait for people to ask me. If I have something to say, I just say it. And so I kind of expect other people to do that as well. So now I'm kind of hyper vigilant. So I notice someone's face change. I don't necessarily know what they're feeling, but I notice that something has changed. And a lot of times now, because of just repeated practice, repeated failures and rejections and social difficulties, I've figured out what that facial change was probably regarding, because a lot of times it causes me to check what I just said and realize, oh, I didn't ask them the same question back and they were expecting that, and now they're upset. But a lot of times these differences in communication and just the way that I see the world are subtle enough from the outside to people who don't know me intimately that you might not notice them, really. And you might just think, she's a little weird, but pretty benign. But I don't really like her a whole lot, and you don't really know why. Maybe it's because my facial expressions don't match the tone of the conversation or don't match what I'm saying that well, or they come across as insincere because I'm masking, or they come across as like arrogant or something like that, even though I'm not meaning it to be, or something about my tone or the way I've said something comes across as aggressive to people maybe. I've been told that before, that I'm too blunt, and so now I mask that as well. And I've been doing that since probably high school, so I've gotten a lot better at it. But unfortunately, it doesn't really convince people that I'm normal. So people still notice that there's something different about me, and even if I am doing my very best to blend in, I really can't. So I think it creates this sort of uncanny valley effect for some people, and it disturbs them, but they can't really put their finger on why. And from the outside, because I'm always giving like 120% absolute perfectionist effort into trying to perform as a neurotypical, people don't realize it. Like, I'm too good of an actor now that people are unconvinced that I'm autistic, so ironically the masking has worked a little too well. I think there's also a misconception about what autism is. A lot of times people don't really know a whole lot about it. And I think there's a really big misconception that all autistic people are really high support needs, and that's not necessarily the case. So now what used to be referred to as Asperger's is under the same umbrella term of autism spectrum disorder. And the reason for that is basically that they observed that it's pretty much the same thing. It's all the same sort of neurotype, essentially. There might be some differences in how someone arrived at that neurotype, but the neurotype is essentially the same. It's just varying degrees of support needs. So I saw somebody, and I can't remember who she was, of course, but she described it as having just a whole bunch of knobs on different symptoms, and some people's symptoms, the knobs are turned way up and on one, like something like sensory difficulties or social difficulties, or even just the ability to communicate, like speaking. Some people can't actually verbalize anything. And I like that description because no autistic person that I've ever met has been identical to me or to any other autistic person. We still all have our own personalities, and the knobs are turned up and down on different things. There are autistic people, for example, who are undersensitive to stimulation, and therefore they go and seek out exciting activities, bright colors, loud noises, things like that. I'm on the other end of that spectrum, where I'm really sound sensitive, and so I talk more quietly than most people would like. And that's another thing that I mask, is I have to remind myself to project more, because to me, in my head, it sounds really loud and I hate it. A lot of people laugh at that because it is a little bit absurd to think that your own voice would be too loud for you. But in workplaces, I have had a lot of people deny the fact that I'm autistic, or not deny, but doubt the fact that I'm autistic, even though I do have a diagnosis. But it seems to take a lot of convincing for people, especially because they don't know anything about it, but they think they do. So a lot of times it's really frustrating because people perceive you as a functioning neurotypical person because you're successfully masking the fact that you're really struggling, and you've learned to hide the fact that you're really struggling to the majority of people. And so they don't really believe you that you actually are struggling, unfortunately. So for the last year, I had been doing a supervisory job, and I was told before that, I had just gotten my autism diagnosis just before I took that job. And I was told by the diagnostician that that would put me into a burnout, most likely, because I was already almost at the threshold. And I took the job anyway, spoiler alert, and I did it for about a year. And that was realistically, I think, about all I could have taken of that job. And now I'm kind of suffering with autistic burnout, which has not been scientifically proven yet, really. It's starting to be, but it's definitely confirmed by a lot of autistic people's experiences for sure. And what that usually consists of is a regression of skills. Like you might not be able to look after yourself as well as you usually would. You might kind of not be able to force yourself to do your normal daily tasks, doing your laundry as frequently. It can really turn into depression very easily, or mimic it. And a lot of times you don't want to go out and socialize a lot, see people, talk to people, because all of that is work to an autistic person. Even with other autistic people, it's a little bit of work. Like, we need time to not be perceived. But with other autistic people, it's easier because we don't have to mask as much. The other autistic person speaks our language, and so we don't have to compensate as much and pretend that we're not autistic. So a lot of that stuff comes really naturally between autistics, and we rarely have very much difficulty communicating with each other. It's mostly when there's two different neurotypes trying to converse. Something else about my particular brand of autism that makes it hard to recognize is that I also have ADHD on top of it. So something that is sort of a cornerstone in autism diagnosis is that you have restricted interests and repetitive behaviors. But for me, because I have ADHD, and that particular neurotype wants novelty, wants change, my restricted interests don't seem as restricted. Maybe you've noticed. That's pretty much what this page is all about. So I have a lot of different interests. A lot of times with someone who is just autistic, you may notice that they have a special interest in maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 things max. Like something like medieval history. I don't know. I'm just pulling out a random topic. It could be anything. And they just have so much knowledge on that, just an incredible depth of knowledge. But that's like all they know about. They don't know about a lot of other things. They don't have a huge breadth of knowledge, maybe. They might have other knowledge because of just education and just necessity, and especially if they've learned things so that they can mask in conversations. But their tendency is to just want to talk about that one topic that they're really, really, really familiar in. So for me, it affects me differently because I have a bunch of different interests. So there's a lot of different things I can talk about, and I can talk about at length in many cases. And I do also have some special interests that have been kind of ongoing for many years, but I also have a bunch of just kind of surface level interests that rotate frequently and change rapidly. So I think that to the outside observer, to someone who's neurotypical, it looks almost like I'm neurotypical, but you know that I'm not. You can recognize that something about me is just a little bit off. You know that there's something weird about me. And a lot of times I think from a neurotypical perspective, because if you're neurotypical, you don't really have the experience of like fighting with your brain to the degree that someone with ADHD or autism or both has to, and trying to make your brain do basic functions, basic processes that your brain should be doing automatically, like filtering information from the outside world and categorizing it in order of importance and demand. So the need to do this task before this one, to an ADHD brain, they all seem equally important. And so it's really hard to choose, and you have to choose those things manually. So a lot of those processes are not happening automatically in the brain, and you have to do them all, manually. So you're cognitively thinking very hard about what to do next and trying to filter all this information and trying to remind yourself to focus and things like that. So it comes across maybe because people don't see that happening on the inside. It looks the same on the outside and it just looks like we're lazy, when really we're actually trying about 10 times harder just to do basic level things, which is really frustrating because a lot of times we are perfectionists and we want to do 100%. We want to do an absolutely stellar job of something, but we just can't. And even when we're trying our hardest, we're only doing about a mediocre job of something. And we're not going to go beyond that. And to someone who doesn't understand that struggle, that looks like we're just being lazy. So that's essentially the very reason that I started this page, because I myself am a super perfectionist, and I've worked on it really hard over the years to make it so that I will do something. Because a lot of times what happens with ADHD and autism is that you have an ideal that you're striving for. And if you can't do it perfectly, you won't do it at all. So for me, I have a whole lot of interests that I absolutely love and I think are super interesting. But a lot of times I will have trouble doing them because I want to do them expertly, when that's not really realistic for me. So in that sense, the ADHD is super dominant in that I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And the reason for that is that a lot of times with an interest, you get to about 75, maybe to 90%. I'm making the statistic up. But, the majority of a task is done, maybe. And once you're past the really challenging, most engaging part of the task, your brain just kind of like shuts off. It just refuses to cooperate. And you can't sustain your attention because you've lost interest. And the interest part is so important to the focus. So many of us will get reasonably good at something. We'll get pretty good, but we won't get to the point maybe of being an absolute expert. And we will always be aware that we could do better, but we just can't quite push ourselves past that last little threshold. And that is related to the fact that we have a different circuitry, basically. So our reward system is different. we need a really big reward to motivate us. So a lot of times we are more prone to addictions and things like that because we seek those really big rewards and we take really big risks maybe, but we can't sustain the attention and focus, and we can't sustain the effort over a long period of time because we have difficulty maintaining consistency. For some people, that interest is strong enough that they continue to practice, they continue to get better at it, and they do reach a certain level of mastery. And especially if your autism is really strong, I think, you're more likely to kind of fall into the routine of it. You might enjoy the routine of it. You might enjoy the structure of learning something, and so you might get really good at it. So a lot of times I edit it out that I look around a lot, but that's because I am ultimately very distracted. And also I can't think if I'm looking at the camera. A lot of times I have difficulty staying focused and staying on track. And for me, I've tried multiple types of medication, and I think that the autism complicates the effectiveness of those medications. And so I haven't really found anything that works for me as well as it works for some people, where they feel like it actually gives them that little bit of a push, that little bit of motivation that they needed to continue doing something and to hold up their life, basically. So in other words, I am raw dogging the ADHD. And as of right now, there's no cure or really treatment for autism, so there's not a lot you can do other than just manage it. So some of the things that I struggle with on a daily basis as an autistic person would be sensory problems, itchy tags or seams on clothing or anything like that, even fragrances in clothing, fragrances of any kind. And also food sensitivities. I have a lot of food sensitivities, so some days I might like a food and then the next day I don't like it anymore and I can't stand it. If I put it in my mouth, I will want to gag. And the sensory sensitivities also encompass temperatures, so hot and cold. If it's a really hot day or a really cold day, I can get really overwhelmed and really irritable. And it's kind of like every symptom like that you have to deal with takes a little bit out of your tank. It drains your battery faster than other people. And so a lot of times you have to manage all of these different factors very carefully. So a lot of times that complicates the interests because most people might be able to just think, I'm going to do that, and then just get up and do it. But if you have ADHD and autism, you're not only having to fight with your executive function to get up and do it, you're also having to manage the other symptoms. So anything like sensory overwhelm. For me, you can imagine with playing the drums, sometimes that is a real problem. And I'm sound sensitive on a certain day. It's really ironic because a lot of times when I'm in control of making the sound, it's better. But there are days when I really can't argue with it and I can't sit down at the drum set because I just can't handle that noise right now, even as much as I love playing them. So I don't want you to take this that autistic people can't do things or can't be good at things, or that people with ADHD can't do things or can't be good at things, because we absolutely can. But I think that we do it in a different way a lot of times, and we do have significant struggles that we have to take into account, and that it would be really nice if other people understood. So really I wanted to make this page partly because I need to refill my own tank while being in burnout, so I need to do something that gives me a sense of meaning in my life, but also to inspire other people who have the same sort of neurotype problems as I do, to realize that you don't have to do it perfectly, and that's not the name of the game. The way I'm thinking about it now that I'm in my 30s, is that what else are you gonna do with your life? What are you gonna do with it anyway? So you might as well do something that you enjoy with your limited time on Earth. Do something that makes you happy. And I just wanted to share that with you guys because it's kind of fun. And also maybe it might help some of you guys to realize you don't have to be perfect at something to start it and to do it. So this is for all my weirdos. I'm talking to you guys. You guys are the ones that I want to know. Now that I'm getting older, I really realize there's no point in me trying to blend in with the rest of society because I'm really just never going to. I've always been a weird person, and I'm always going to be. And I think at this point, I just want to find the other people who are also weird like me. I want to find the people that are creating, they're making things, they're doing interesting things, they have weird interests. And my light just got out. So at this point in my life, I'm getting to a point where I can't really mask as much as I used to be able to. And I'm not really sad about that because it had really, really bad mental health impacts. And it still does. And I find it really hard to unmask sometimes because it becomes an automatic thing that you just do, knee-jerk reaction to protect yourself. But I really don't see the value in it as much as I used to. And I really think that people who go the route of finding their fellow weirdos are doing the right thing. So if you're autistic or ADHD or both, I think that's probably one of the best things you can do for yourself is to just find the other people who are like you. It just makes your life so much less stressful because those are the people who are most likely to be able to just accept you the way that you are. And those are the people who are going to love you for being weird. A lot of times if you're surrounded by neurotypical people, holistic people, whatever you want to say, you might feel like there's something wrong with you, or that you're not good enough and that you have to try to change and be someone else. But you don't. And I think that when you're surrounded by people who are like you, you're not going to feel like that as much. And honestly, this is a bit of a grim fact, but autistic people are way more likely to die by suicide. So I think that it's also in your best interest, health-wise, to do that. So that's my serious chat for today. I just want to tell you guys why I'm here, what I'm doing, who I am, and give you a little bit of context on why I'm doing all these hobbies badly. If you're new here, welcome. And I hope you'll stick around to watch me fail at things. To my fellow weirdos, I'm looking at you, and I love you. You're welcome here, and I will defend you.